Good morning, Claire.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Nice to meet you.
How do you want to do this?
We could start with a very short introduction of Alta Vista, perhaps.
Okay, sure. So I'll try to make short quite a long history because Alta Vista was founded in 1998. Our first vintage, which was Alto was 1998. But I'm, let's say, privileged to be born into a family who was already involved in another wine region than Mendoza, which is Champagne. So you might have, noticed a slight French accent. So the family was the owner of the Champagne house Piper Heidsieck for almost 250 years. So first vintage was 1783. I have a beautiful painting in the room next to where I am now, which is the founder of Piper Heidsieck, Florent Louis Heidsieck, who had also, it's Champagne in general. They're genius in marketing. So already at this time, they didn't have Instagram, but he was very clever to ask a painter to paint, his first vintage, who was introduced to the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette. So they knew already very much about marketing. And so it goes on until my father, who was the last president of the company under the family ownership. And I'm just mentioning to this not, to just, throw some information about, this family. But I think it is important also to understand who was my father. My father was really a pioneer. But in Champagne, as you know, they were always pioneer. They opened so many markets around the world. But my father was a real, I think, pioneer, not only for Piper Heidsieck, but also for the Champagne region, because he was the first one, for example, to start the production of sparkling wine in California. So he created a winery in Ellsberg, Sonoma, to produce an American sparkling wine for the American market. He also did in Argentina. So he created another brand called Piper's Henri Piper, where he produced sparkling wine in Argentina, in Mendoza, for the domestic market. And it was a very popular brand because I think at its peak, they were selling above 1 million bottles in Argentina. So he was always very much a pioneer and always, saw the potential of each country through his, Champagne eyes. But when I started to show interest into the wine business, so the family had sold since the Champagne business. And I'm sure you understand it was very difficult for me to do something in the Champagne region, because as we know, it's difficult, to grow anything under large trees. So I wanted to always wanted to find a challenge in the wine business, and obviously Champagne was not the region where I could achieve it after so many centuries of the family involved there. So very quickly I looked somewhere else. So I went to Bordeaux. I bought a small estate in the Saint-Émilion region on the plateau of Saint-Émilion called Château Sansonnet. And the challenge here was very easy, was very simple, which was, it was very hard, but the goal was very simple. It was to reclassify the estate because it had been declassified. So we worked for a decade for the classification of Sansonnet. Now Sansonnet is, a Grand Cru classé. And during that time, I met someone called Jean-Michel Arcotte. He was the owner of Château Clinet in Pomerol. And he was also looking for new challenges outside of Bordeaux. So we said, why don't we just look, around the world to see where we could, bring, our experience and expertise and philosophy. And very quickly came Argentina, because what I was telling you about my father involvement in Argentina. So we went there in 1997, and we fell in love with, I don't know if you've been to Mendoza, but we fell in love with just the region, I think, just the nature. Even before even trying the wines, I remember we arrived in Mendoza at the end of the day, and we saw this, mountains and these, old vineyards, and ancient olive trees, and we really fell in love with the nature. After we fell in love with the people, because I think a project cannot be started without people. And I think that's how we started Alta Vista. We just bought a very small, almost abandoned vineyard in Las Compuertas. So we're not going to taste a single vineyard alizarin, but Alto as a quite important part of alizarin vineyard into it. So it's a six.
So just briefly on alizarin, I just completely forgot to mention that, and I have it here. You probably don't, but okay. I have it here with me.
Okay, so yeah, we can taste it. It's interesting because that was the first vineyard that we bought with a little bit this this approach of pomme roll. So it's a small hectare. It's 6.3 hectares. It's the oldest vineyard that we have because it was planted in 1920. And really we took care it was really like a haute couture approach, like we do in Bordeaux and like we do also in Champagne, because people forget that in Champagne you don't have only the négociant, but more and more, and people now start also to see you have exceptional small growers who are really showing now how Champagne is also made with various terroirs. So we have this terroir-driven philosophy also in Champagne. I always want to reiterate this because sometimes consumers just are seeing Champagne just through the big brands, but now as we both know, they're doing exceptional terroir-driven Champagne as well with small growers. So with this philosophy, we started Alta Vista. So Alta Vista is, and I speak about this because I think this is one of the difference of Alta Vista compared to our friends and competitors. It's this always we kept this French philosophy. Our head winemaker Didier de Bonneau worked at Clinet, worked at Sansonnet, moved with me when we started Alta Vista, and is still there. So this philosophy, I think you find it very much into our wines. We always looking, and it is a challenge in Argentina. It's a fact. It's just the fact of the nature to always look for balanced wines. So we have the grapes. We have the Malbec. We have the Cabernet. We have the desertic conditions. So we have of course very rich wines. But really, this philosophy that we brought is always to look for a balance. I think this is really what is what is Alta Vista. And when people asking me what is Alta Vista, if you can say in one word, I will always say it's really the combination of both culture. It was the combination of what we could bring the best out of France and out of Argentina. And that's what I think was very important, with it's, we know, I think in France, how to show the potential of the terroir, but the Argentina help us to see where we are with this terroir. So I think it's really this combination of both. I think as French, we could not have done with Alta Vista without the Argentina. And I think the Argentina, I hope, are quite thankful for bringing also this more into the winemaking, philosophy part of the process of expressing these terroirs.
I was going to ask you after the tasting, but I think it ties in now. Just to talk a bit more about single vineyard wines in Argentina. So it's correct that you were the first to produce single vineyard Malbecs in Argentina at high altitude. Do you think, obviously we're seeing a lot more of that now. How important do you think it's seen in Argentina to produce single vineyards now?
We're in 2001. We launched a first single vineyard. So it was at this time only a Serenade and Alizarin. And I think a little bit like what you find now in California and also in Champagne. People now are more knowledge about the region where they're tasting the wines from. And so they are looking more into the expression of each part of the region, and we see it very well with Champagne. People now start, to understand the concept of the village classification. In California, as you know, people also now start really to understand the different appellation in Napa and Sonoma. And I think in Argentina, with the Argentinian, the first, they are also now more knowledge about the Mendoza, and they want to discover more of the expression of the region. So we are still into a little bit the northern and southern oasis. So of course, everyone is talking about, the Valle di Uco, which, basically didn't exist 50 years ago. But also, as you see now, more and more people, when they are acquainted with, the style of the southern oasis or the style of northern oasis, they want to discover more into this oasis. So we see really, notably in the Valle di Uco, first we see official classification of terroir, but we see also a producer showing more and more this, not only specific terroir, but even inside the terroir, some specific, expressions through parcels. So I think we were very getting from I would say, a prêt-à-porter approach of the region to a haute couture approach of the region with this terroir. Now, as you said, it was mostly Malbec, because I think people had to first discover what was the potential with the Malbec. Now we start to see also with Cabernet, because it has Mendoza has shown is an incredible potential for Cabernet Sauvignon first, but now also Cabernet Franc. I think really the future will go into these grape varietals who are showing freshness, natural freshness, as we always challenging, this semi-desertic climate condition. So to answer your question, I believe in the future of these, grapes, again, who will show the potential of the terroir of Mendoza. And I think, for example, Cabernet Franc is a very good example of, what can be done in this region. We do, for example, we also have started now to launch some sparkling wines. So at a very, very high altitude, we have a small vineyard at 1,350 meters in Tupungato, where we produce, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay for top, Méthode Champenoise sparkling wine. So I really see, this more and more, this experimental approach of not only new terroir, but as you said, of new grape varieties. So
I'm curious about the sparkling wine at high altitude. What are the challenges for that? Would the fruit profile be a bit riper because of the intense sunlight? I mean, I'm sure you can retain acidity, but I mean, in a lot of these wines, like Malbec reds, you get a very ripe fruit profile.
Yes.
How does that work with a traditional method sparkling?
It's a very, very good question. I'm a bit. We will need to find some time to taste this sparkling wine we made. It's called the Grand Assemblage 2012. It's almost a decade experimental project that we started, because of course, with my heritage, I really wanted to see the potential of sparkling wines in the region of Mendoza. So we tried a lot of terroir, and to answer your question, we arrived to the conclusion, and we only released this wine after 10 years. So in 2012, we made it was a very interesting vintage. We made a sparkling wine, which now we only released now, which is it's 90% Chardonnay, 10% Pinot Noir from the same parcel. So it's a very small parcel. It's 2 hectares. I was saying Tupungato, at the highest part of Tupungato. And to answer your question, that was the challenge, because the challenge which we don't have in Champagne. In Champagne, we have a natural balance coming from the soil. There we have, of course, with this this semi-desertic condition, we have still, for me, very challenging daily temperature. So we still have this concentration of sugar that we need to balance with acidity. So of course you get it during the night with the thermal amplitude, but it's always a challenge. So we had really to move our harvest date. So I think this is really, I think one of the key factor of getting the balance is really, the date of harvest. Not only with sparkling wine and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but also now with Malbec. At Alta Vista for Alto, we are almost now in a similar vintage condition, we are 2 weeks earlier now than we were 15 years ago. So I think this is the challenge. We still have, very ripe grapes for the sparkling wine, but now by having earlier harvest, we compensate, the ripeness of the grapes. And I think this is really the challenge.
And so that's the earlier harvest date. I guess that's through better understanding of the balance in the wines of the sugar levels, fruit profile, alcohol. Does climate change affect high altitude vineyards as much or actually less?
We see a lot. As I was telling you, we worked with Université de Montpellier on getting a database every year database on 2 of our vineyards. Alizarin is one of it for the Alto, to see the impact of the climate change, and we see, of course, the date of the ripeness of the grapes is now much earlier as it was before. So we are constantly moving backward or forward the date of harvest. So I think this is a challenge. It's even more when you are at a low altitude, but still, in our vineyards, which are, probably one of the highest vineyards in Mendoza in terms of old vines, we are 1,100 meters. It's still facing, this, earlier ripeness cycle of the grapes. So yes, we need to move just more forward, the date of harvest, but of course, always trying to get the optimal ripeness of the grapes. So it's I think more and more a challenge. And I would say it's more and more people are always saying, oh, you don't have really a difference of vintage every year. I think we have it more and more. And it's more and more a challenge for winemaker, and more that's I see what is in France. It's more and more the année de vigneron, where you need to work very hard on the harvest and after on the vinification later. And
just one more question before we actually start tasting the wine. Sure. I've noticed that some of these wines have quite high alcohol, so 15% is quite common. Is that a winemaking decision? How do you balance that with ripeness of fruit? Has it increased over the last few years, or has it always been a conscious decision to ripen the fruit flavors more rather than having lower alcohol?
It was always a little bit, the philosophy when we came from France. We like in France ripe grapes. So, but I would say this is the opposite challenge that we have in Argentina. Argentina, we have this, ripe grape, but we like when the grapes has reached the optimal maturity, because we feel that we have the color, we have the concentration, the structure. So we like also, wines, we like to consider them, and now we have 20 years to say, aging potential. So after we have really to work on in the vinification, the maceration period is very important, trying to get the best of this ripeness without getting into unbalanced wine. So I think that the maceration process is very important in our part. And after, of course, the oak treatment is also, very important. So we have reduced a lot. We had to, before we were aging a little bit like, what we learned from Bordeaux or Champagne. We were aging the first vintage of Alto were aged 24 months in a new barrel of 28 for 225. Now we only age them for 12 months in like, Alf 225 and Alf 600. So we have also, changed this, try to really, and also through this, single vineyard concept, try really to show the purity, I think, of the terroir expression. So this has, changed a lot. So to answer your question, yes, it's more challenging. Alcohol has been always in Argentina, in Mendoza, a challenge. So we try, to keep the alcohol because we think it's bringing a lot of, positive components, but also try to be very careful about, the negative part of these, components. And this is, I think, really when the grapes are coming into the winery, the way, we macerate, we press, the juices.
What do you mean about the negative components of high alcohol, aside from it having high alcohol?
Well, I always think that with high alcoholic wines, you find sometimes to have unbalanced wine. There's this feeling of alcohol, overpowering the fruit expression of the grapes and the terroir. And so we are very meticulous about this because we are here to express a terroir. So the alcohol should never, take over the expression of the terroir. And it has been challenging sometimes in very hot vintage. It has been a challenge, but we've been always really working with this. The vineyard has been really taking care, with all this database, all this experience now we have. And I think, we know much more now of vineyards that we knew 20 years ago. So that's also helping. I think now we know how to manage much better this alcohol component as we did 20 years ago.
Let's taste some of your wines. So I have your 2019 Terroir selection, Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yes.
Should we start with the Cabernet or the Malbec?
You were asking about, the future of the region in terms of grape varieties. So we can taste with the Cabernet Sauvignon, because I think that's a good expression of what can be done outside of Malbec-driven wine. So Cabernet Sauvignon I think is really the new alternative of Malbec. So the concept here of the terroir selection line is a little bit what we do in Champagne called assemblage. So we like, to blend. We think that when I was talking more generally about, the French philosophy, I think the know-how of blending is one of this, important part of the French philosophy. So here we are blending two vineyards. The two vineyards are in the Vallée des Uco. So you have 65% of, and we'll talk about this later with a single vineyard, of, we can call it a fairly newly planted vineyard. It was planted in 1999. It's in Campo de los Andes at 1,170 meters. It's about 120 hectares. So we use a lot for estate line, but the best parcel are used for the terroir selection and also, and we'll talk about this a bit later, for this new release single vineyard called Albanese. So here it's very Vallée des Uco. So you know very well about the northern oasis, the expression of it. What is interesting here is that you have 65% of, I would say, young vines and 35% of old vines. So here, the 65%, as I said to you, are coming from Campo de los Andes. So it's 20 years old, the vineyard, and the 35 are coming also from Vallée des Uco for a vineyard which is approximately 60 years old. It's called Temis. We'll taste, the single vineyard Temis, and this is in El Cepillo. It's a second or third vintage we are launching. We liked the idea of blending old and young vines together, coming from the same region, even if the 65%, so the Campo de los Andes is a little bit higher, but we'll talk about this when we do single vineyard, a little bit higher. The soil is more poor, and Temis is a little bit lower in altitude, so it's 1,150, it's 20 meters less, but it's still a difference. And here you have a little bit more a sandy component. So we like, to blend the two terroirs together.
I like the quite mineral component. So I was expecting something much more fruity, and obviously it does have a lot of blue and dark fruit. But it does have this
gravelly
tar character to it. And is that from the soil or?
Yes, so it will be very interesting after when we taste the single vineyard, because we launched this new single vineyard called Albanese, which is coming from Campo de los Andes, where here you have 65% of it. And I was always against it because it's a fairly new planted vineyard, and always like all vines single vineyard concept. But I was convinced by a winemaker that we had here the potential of a great terroir. And what you just said, it is this minerality this natural, I would say, balance that you have with the wines that you feel here. Is it the grape varietal? Probably, because I think here, with Cabernet, we have also this, naturally, expression of it, but it's really the soil. It's a very, it's a granitic soil at a very high altitude. So I think this is how we get this, minerality out of it. And you will see with Albanese, I'll let you, tell me what you think. We really find this also with the Albanese single vineyard. It's this, minerality, this purity that we find. I think in general in Valle de Uco, you have more, you find more purity. I would say a bit maybe more balance with the wine, but also this natural, minerality feeling, on the palate.
Shall we move on to the Malbec? So I'm just looking at the labels now. You actually written the blend of the separate vineyards. So this Malbec is all four.
Absolutely.
But a blend of 4 vineyards: Albanese, Temis, Altarina, and Azamor.
Absolutely. So just in 30 seconds, just quickly, because both of them are the same, but aging also. Before we used to, again, we were using 75% of new oak for 12 months. And by the time and the better and more understanding of terroir, now we only use 1/3 of new barrel, 1/3 of second year, and 1/3 of third year. So we have also, really more and more we like the oak is giving, this structure, these tannins that we really like with the wines. But now we want to really have the fruit expression coming out from our terroir being shown, through the wine. So, we have, to answer your question at the beginning of this tasting, we are moving also in more pure expression of, the terroir. We are really here, I would say, in the heart of the blending philosophy. So here we use all of our terroir, and we combine them to give this style. So it's the style of the house, that they call it in Champagne. But it's really here to show not only you need to have a terroir, but you need also, I think, great wines are always, in a way, great also assemblage. And here we wanted to show, at this price point that, the know-how of blending. So for this 2019, you will see also it's kind of interesting. It's mostly Valle de Uco. So you have 65% again of the Campo de los Andes vineyard, and you have 15 from Temis. So almost 80% are made from the same vineyards than the Cabernet, the terroir selection Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's very Valle de Uco profile, and you feel it with on the nose. After we used 20% of the of Luján de Cuyo, so the famous vineyard that we have in Las Compuertas, which I think is giving the backbone. It's giving the structure into the wine. So when I was saying it, and we don't have time, but it would be because I'm always very interested in exchanging. But I think Valle de Uco as beautiful expression of in the nose of purity of the fruit. I really like the balance, the Valle de Uco, but I like the structure of these old vines in these, high altitude Luján de Cuyo vineyards. So in Las Compuertas, we have this the structure, the backbone of the wines is brought by these vineyards. We have only 20%, but it's giving this I call it smoothness.
I find a very, very fine, silky tannin texture. So it's there, but it's very fine and obviously fresh acidity. So I agree with your structure, but I mean, obviously it's a different varietal, but it's already more open and much more fragrant.
Yes, that's absolutely. I agree with you. You hear, I think it's the Malbec. So Malbec has always this, this natural, open nose component that you don't have with the Cabernet as a great, a profile. After, I really think you on the nose, you feel more the Valle de Uco part of the Malbec. But in the mouth, on the palate, I really see more these, this, I call it Lojan de Cuyo, but it's really Las Compuertas. You really feel all these wines, and you will, when you taste Alezarin, you will see it is a very masculine wine with a lot of structure. And when you blend it together, I think you have a very interesting wine. It's really the combination of, the feminine parts of the Malbec in the Valle de Uco and the masculine part of the Las Compuertas part, which is making this wine interesting. Again, we're talking, I think at, less than $30 US retail price. So we're trying here really you were asking me about the terroir, to show here to people that they don't need to pay, a single vineyard at $80 to start to have, to taste the notion, of the, the terroir from Mendoza.
Okay. With 2018 and your single vineyard.
Yes, so 2018, I suggest to you a certain order for tasting the wines, because I think it's always interesting to start with the Lojan de Cuyo part, which is, we could start with Serenade. You have after Alezarin, which I don't have, but this is a wine I know because it's, the first vineyard. And after we could move to the Valle de Uco, which is, still a question, you see Temis and Albanève. I think we can do Temis, and after we can finish with Albanève, if you don't mind. Okay. Or we can start with Albanève, which is the fairly new planted vineyard, and finish with Temis.
Perfect.
So Serenade is like, it's his name, Serenade. It's like the song. It's so this is it's our smallest vineyard. It's only 4 hectares. It's in Lojan de Cuyo. It was planted in 1935. So the concept here, I'm sorry, I should have started with it. The concept here is very simple. We have vineyards are more or less the same altitude, 1,150 meters. They are all, except now Albanève, old vines. So I would say the average is 65 years old vineyard. To be really precise, some of them are, and I will mention that to you, some of them are a little bit older, some of them young, but the average is about 65. It's, of course, 100% Malbec, different, of course, Massal selection, and, of course, different, different soil. And really the concept was to show that we have terroir. And each one has his own definition of what is a terroir. I like people to taste it, to taste the difference. I think that's the only way to convince people that we have terroir in Argentina, Mendoza. So Serenade, and please let me now, because I always like exchange, debate. It's we are here to compare the wines that, tell me what you think about the wine. So here, I'll just give you the basic information, and after we can talk about this. So 1935 planted vineyard, 4 hectares. This is really at 1,150 meters above the sea level. It's one of after Alezarin. This is the second we bought, and it's we don't have the rest, but it's 3 parcels. This is the highest part of a much larger 80 hectares vineyard, but we have only this 4 hectares. So, and here again, vinification are exactly the same. So we have the same about 28 days of maceration, same aging. So it's really here talking about purely and exclusively the terroir expression.
With Serenade.
Yes, Serenade.
I get an almost savory, salty quality. So, I mean, I get some very ripe dark fruit like mulberry, spiced plums and everything. But I also get this like salted olives and brine, some kind of like salty undertone, which is fascinating.
Yes, it's for me. You will see. I call it the more European terroir of the 4. I like the fact that exactly. You have this salty, but it's giving me this sense of freshness. It's you're right. It's like you really. So it's interesting. It's very interesting what you're saying, because this is I didn't speak because that's why I love this kind of tasting when we exchange. This is the terroir which has the less pebbles. It's the one who is the most sandy one. So that's very interesting what you're saying. I think, and so on the same time, it's the one it's the more light, the more feminine, the more, I would not say elegant, but it has this very European touch, this very, very soft tannin, and this not sandy, because you said the word, this saltiness, which I really think, here you have less pebbles, the very old vines, so the roots, the very, long roots are getting, less stress. You feel that there's a natural here balance, because, there is less pebbles, they are suffering more. So maybe they are less aromatic, let's say like this. Maybe they have less structure than the wines we're going to taste, after. But I feel there's also the more, feminine wines of it. And really this, over now the 20 years, because Serenade was one of the first two single vineyard, you feel this, very balanced, very soft balance of the wine. So you'll taste Alizarine.
Yes, I have Alizarine here.
Yeah, so Alizarine is it's this 6 hectares, which is in. So Las Compas is very interesting because I always call it. It's a bit like the not only our vineyard, but it's a bit the Aubryon of the city of Mendoza. So we are basically in the suburb of Mendoza. Very old vines. So this is the oldest. Planted vineyard. It was it's more than 100 years, 110 years, planted in 1923. So very old vines. This is the first, vineyard we bought. We are at with Cheval des Andes. We are this last vineyard, on the top of the appellation now, because it is an appellation now. Really on the bottom of the mountain. So here you really, I always say this is the more masculine. Serenade is for me a little bit the more feminine, but it's European femininity. Here you have, it's very masculine. You feel the structure. And when we're talking about the terroir selection, the Malbecs, when I was telling you that for me, it was bringing the structure, I think you see it why here. He has this, of course, it's, very interesting, expression on the nose of these old vines, high altitude, very ripe expression, even if you have the vintage here effect. So it's still very fresh, but it's the structure really. It's the backbone.
More firmness on the palate, more a more firm tannin structure, but it's still very sleek and very silky. So it's very well integrated still. Exactly,
but it's exactly what you said. That compared to Serenade, here you feel a little bit more the tannins. They are less soft than the one with Serenade, but still silky. I think, and this is really I have to say I do believe into in the quality of the tannins with these old vines. I think old vines are giving this incredible silky tannins. It's a big debate because we'll taste Albanese. So you see now I even open, I'm not this, closed mind, Frenchman who doesn't want to. So that's why I said, okay, let's try with Albanese. And you will tell me, very interesting, it's a debate about the tannins. It's really the debate about the silkiness, the softness of the tannins when we try Albanese versus Thémis with the Vallée de Uco. So now we're moving from one oasis to the other one. So we're going from the southern to the northern oasis. So you'll taste the two of the single vineyard there. So Thémis. So let's try Thémis because we are still in the concept of the old vines driven terroir. So Thémis is in El Cepillo district of Vallée de Uco. It's a beautiful 7 hectares vineyard planted in 1960. Here you have more and more the the granitic part, playing a role in the Valle de Uco. So I was saying Las Comportas, you have, it's more pebbles. You have much bigger stones. Here in Valle de Uco, in Temis, but even more with Albanese, you read the decomposition of the mountain. So you have much more this granitic part of it, and you feel it very much, I think, into the Temis, especially in the nose. I think it's in the nose. For me, it's very Valle de Uco, very expressive on the nose. But I'll let you, taste, and we can talk. Very expressive on the nose, and
it is very expressive on the nose. I think riper than Alita with like darker, bluer fruits, blueberries, blackberries, dark plums, and also this like hot stone character. Not the same as gravel, not the same as stones, but like a hot stone.
Yes, it's a little bit like in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you have this feeling of like, you understand very well how the terroir is doing here. I think you feel more. So the expression is so it's still all vines. So, but you feel more these, roots, surrounded by the stones, being reheated by, very,
It's
hot
crazy
day.
how you can like somehow smell that in the wine.
Crazy.
And
It's
what
like
the relation is.
the saltiness of Serenade. It's the sand. It's the sandy component. It's that's why I love this kind of tasting, because there is always with words, there is a relation with one of the soil component. So Albanese now, this is the new wine. I think I told you already everything about it, because it was a big debate. I was always very much against it, because I don't consider it to be, it's not an old vine. It was planted in 1999. But I have to admit, years after year, this particular parcel, which is, the highest parcel of this 80 hectares, was always giving exceptional results. And to the point that we said, okay, we have Temis, why don't we try to compare? And we started in 2010 to taste side by side, these two parcels, and we really discovered that we have with this parcel something very exceptional. So it's very much what is Valle de Uco. It's true. Like, there is very few old vines. Temis is one of the very few old vines vineyard. Albanese, it's, I think, typical what is now, what is happening now in Valle de Uco. This newly plantation, high density, very close to the mountain, very extreme condition. So I'll let you taste after Temis. So it's also same altitude. We're a little bit higher. So to be, very exact, we are here at 1,170. It's very small. It's only the parcel of 2 hectares. It's Valle de Uco, but it's you feel more you have a better, I think, feeling of what is really the condition in the Valle de Uco. You have, all the what is making Valle de Uco interesting. It's the freshness, it's the concentration. Now it's the debate of the tannins. So that's very interesting to have your opinion, versus, Temis versus Albanese. It's the silkiness of the tannins. Can we reach it with 60 years old vineyard versus a 20 years old vineyard? That was really.
So this has been really fascinating to taste, because I know I said Temis was the most intense so far, but Albanese is very intense, surprisingly intense compared to all the other old vines. It's very big, it's very perfumed, it's very punchy. Lots of dark fruit, like cassis essence, and
I feel there is maybe not this silkiness that you have with the old vines of the Temis, but you still have a lot of balance and structure. And probably
there's a lot of power for sure.
A lot of power, exactly. A lot of power. But I would say young power. This like you feel that the vines are younger. They deliver a lot of power, but it's maybe not this. With the Temis, it's this old power. This, I don't know if, but I think we when you taste, it's the versus of old to young power. It's still powerful wines, very intense, but I think the young ones are giving even more, intensity into this power on the nose, but also I think on the structure.
And great, last but not least.
But not least. So, Alto. So Alto was also some kind of a revolution. I would call it in Argentina. I should not call it a revolution coming from France, but it was. I have to say one of the first wine to be blended. So as one of these so-called iconic wines, I don't really like this name, but that's how they call it in Argentina. It was one of the few, and still now, which is not 100% Malbec. It's always, mostly it's mostly Malbec, but it's always a little bit of Cabernet. Here for this vintage, we have 85% Malbec and 15% of the Cabernet Sauvignon. So here it's very interesting. So you have really you have 50 and 50% also of the both oasis. So you have 50% of Las Compuertas. So here we have really taking the oldest parcel of what you tasted of the single vineyard called Alezarin. They are the oldest one. They were really the one planted in 1920. And this I think is giving again the structure of the wine. And after we used now more and more, years after years, we have used the Valle de Uco part. So now we have 50% Valle de Uco, 35% of it's Malbec, and 15% is of Cabernet. And I will explain to you about, because I was saying about Temis. So here I think the Malbec of Las Compuertas is giving the structure. The Malbec of the Valle de Uco of the Campo de los Andes is giving the nose. We were just talking about, Albanese and Temis. So I think you have the nose very much of the Malbec of the Campo de los Andes. And we have this tiny small parcel, it's almost half a hectare of very old Cabernet planted next to our Malbec vineyard of Temis. So here we have a potential, and I see the future also for single vineyard Cabernet in Argentina, but we like to blend in Alto. I think it's really, giving even more power into the structure of the wine, still bringing balance. And the Cabernet, I think, is giving so as I say, it's supporting the backbone, but it's also giving the balance of the structure.
It is very structured the tannins are firm, but they're very fine as well.
Yes.
It has a very compact structure, so it's very well knitted together.
The idea here was it's exactly what you said. It was to make a compact wine with ultra refined tannins. But with the aging potential. Because when we really started this wine, it was, again, we're coming from France, with this wines aging for decades. And we thought we should be able to get this in Mendoza. But we need to blend. We need to blend great varietals, and we need to blend terroir in order to have this very structured wine at their birth, but also having after the aging potential for later. And that was really the concept, with the Alto. And
with Alto, this definitely needs a couple more years to even taste. Yeah.
You see, I'm retasting the wine. It's very interesting because it's already, the last time was a week ago. And the wine is nice evolution. You start to see, I've been always fighting about, we need to have these wines always, we keep it at least 2 years in bottle. Because that's, I think, at this, level, single vineyard Alto, the bottling also is very important. Really keep it, as much as you can within the bottle before releasing it. Really to have this, to soften the tannins, and having them ready to be opened now, but also, showing, the incredible, aging potential of the wine.